This week's episode is sponsored by Mizen, makers of the best and most affordable high-quality Japanese steel knives for your kitchen. If you want to see what kind of amazing food I made with these knives this week, and find out more about a big 20% discount they're offering just for Film Room viewers, stick around to the end of the show and I'll show you how to get it. Is Daniel Jones a good quarterback? That question has been on my mind for months now since the end of Jones's rookie campaign, and Lord knows Giants fans have been asking for my opinion on him for even longer than that. But to be honest, I'm still no closer now in July to having an answer for you than I was back in December. Admittedly, there's a lot to like with Jones, both on the field and off, but there's also so much to dislike that I cannot definitively say yet that he's still going to be starting 3 years from now. Jones is without a doubt one of the most frustrating, but also one of the most exciting young quarterbacks in the league, and that makes evaluating his potential a really hard task. However, because I'm me, I'm going to give it a shot and at least try to explain why he's so hard to figure out. If there was one trait that I could say really sticks out with Jones, it's toughness. The dude does not care about pressure at all. He will hang in that pocket and take the nastiest of nasty hits if he needs to just to get the ball out, and he'll always pop right back up and get on with the next play, even after he takes a big shot. The guy is a tank, and I love that about him, but more importantly, he's a tank that never takes his eyes off the field when he has pressure barreling down on him. His eyes are always looking deep, always scanning for an open throw, and if he's able to avoid pressure, he's really good at finding receivers to get the ball to. Fearless is probably the best word I would use to describe him, and when that fearlessness is packaged with good pocket movement, arm strength, decision making, and accuracy, you can get plays like this one. This is from the Cardinals game about halfway through the season, and it's a perfect example of what Giants fans, and obviously Giants coaches too, hope that Jones will be in the future on a more consistent basis. The concept is pretty simple. It's a double move off a fake bubble slant RPO where they want to catch this field side corner, Byron Murphy, with a pump fake to the slant first, and then hit him with a double move down the sideline if he takes the cheese. And if that doesn't work, they've still got Darius Slayton working the deep dig route on the backside as a second or even third read. So from a progression standpoint, the double move to Latimer is the first read, Golden Tate on the bubble is the alert read just in case this nickel is blitzing so he can get the ball out quickly, and the dig from Slayton is the last progression if neither of those first two options work. So basically he's working from left to right across the field. Now, the Cardinals are in a match quarters look here, which is basically just zone coverage while using man coverage principles, and Murphy does an excellent job here of not taking the bait on the double move, and he stays over the top of Latimer's route, which takes away that first read down the sideline. At the same time, Tremaine Brock stays patient on the bubble to Tate as well, so that's out too, and Jones now has to work from left to right all the way back to the dig route just to find an open man. But while doing that, he also sees his left guard, Will Hernandez, getting collapsed through the middle of the pocket, so Jones does a great job of drifting away from that pressure that he felt while keeping his eyes downfield to find Slayton on his third read. On the throw to the dig itself, Jones also did a great job of reading defensive back positioning and fitting the ball low and inside, both away from Patrick Peterson sitting over the top of it and just out of reach of Budda Baker, who was sitting underneath the route trying to rob it. And this was just a great ball. When you combine how perfect this throw was with his movement in the pocket and his decisiveness while reading the field, this is exactly the kind of play that the Giants will point to when they want to show what Jones is capable of. This is legitimately awesome stuff, and truth be told, he makes plays like this one every single game. You see these flashes every week, and you can't help but go, there it is, that's the guy, that's the franchise quarterback that we want to see. But those flashes of good are not alone, and more often than not, they come with equal or even bigger flashes of bad. Despite being tougher than a $2 steak, and despite the fact that he's overall a pretty accurate thrower with a great personality and work ethic, there were issues, and they were the exact same issues that we saw at Duke that I think most of us hoped would leave him once he got in the NFL. For instance, even though I said that Jones is not fazed by pressure at all, I think part of the reason why that pressure doesn't affect him is because he almost never feels it coming. It's almost like Jones constantly lives in this state of blissful ignorance in the pocket that both helps him because he doesn't play scared, but it also hurts him because he just takes so many f***ing sacks. And honestly, even though his offensive line wasn't good, many of those sacks he took were entirely avoidable. On a big percentage of his throws, and especially on passing concepts that work down the field and require Jones to hold the ball for a longer period of time, he was straight up oblivious to pressure and would run himself right into sacks. He wouldn't see spin moves that would put rushers right into his face until it was too late. He was really bad at feeling backside pressure, especially since he couldn't actually see it with his own eyes, and even on some occasions he would just run himself right into the waiting arms of defenders without even realizing it. Just look at this play against the Eagles where he stepped up in front of his offensive line and stayed there for some reason, so Hernandez had no shot to actually pick up the stunt before Jones took the sack. Like, it's one thing to step up in the pocket and escape out the front door if they give it to you, that in itself is fine, but if you step up through that front door and stay there waiting to get hit, that's bad. You've got to just keep going. There's nobody to protect you anymore out there. And when Jones does that, he's got to move and try to make a throw while on the run instead of just waiting to get killed. Far too often, Jones would just try to hang in the pocket instead of escaping and making plays off schedule, and he would get totally obliterated when he didn't even have to be. To back that up, let's look at some numbers here to help contextualize what we see on film when Jones doesn't feel pressure around him. For starters, he has a very low time to sack average at 3.12 seconds, which is right up there with a bunch of very immobile QBs like Case Keenum, Jared Goff, Matt Ryan, Tom Brady, and Phillip Rivers, while most of the quarterbacks with very high time to sack averages are guys that either feel pressure really well and escape early to buy more time, or the ones who are super mobile and can get out of pressure even when they don't feel it early, like Drew Lock, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, Dak Prescott, and Josh Allen. In short, what this means is that even though Daniel Jones in a vacuum is a really good athlete and can run away from pressure if he sees it, he was so oblivious to the rush that he often never felt that first wave of pressure coming, and by the time he did, he had defenders all over him and he couldn't get out of it to extend the play, even if he wanted to. Secondly, the Giants coaching staff tended to avoid play action almost entirely. Jones's play action pass rate was 37th in the NFL at just 18% of attempts, because play action passes typically lead to holding the ball longer. And statistically, the longer Jones held the ball, the more likely it was for him to run himself into a sack. Pat Shurmur avoided those concepts and tried to emphasize getting the ball out quickly instead because he couldn't trust Jones to avoid pressure himself on longer developing plays. Just for some more context, Jones's numbers when he held the ball for at least 2.5 seconds were atrocious. He took 35 of his 40 sacks when holding the ball that long, and keep in mind he only played in 12 games. He only had a 55% completion percentage, and he had a 14-7 TD to interception ratio, which is just okay, I guess. And his passer rating was only just shy of 82, compared to all of his numbers when Shurmur called quicker concepts that allowed him to get the ball out in under 2.5 seconds, where he was much more effective. I also suspect that Shurmur didn't like Jones to hold the ball that long and work deep down the field because overall, on deeper passing concepts, he was less accurate and a worse decision maker. So it really wasn't worth it for them to roll the dice in pass protection on these deeper play calls anyway. There was just something about throwing the ball down the field that really brought out the worst in Jones, despite the fact that he was honestly fine at throwing it everywhere else on the field. Here's a few examples that show what I'm talking about because, trust me, this is a bigger problem than people think it is. For starters, let's look at this pass breakup that was almost an interception against the Lions, were it not for Tracy Walker failing to get both feet in bounds. And the main thing to know here is that the Giants are running a concept known as middle read. This play has always been a deep passing staple that has been heavily relied on by coaches like Bruce Arians to generate chunk plays, and the play is mainly structured around this read right down the middle from the wide receiver, Evan Ingram. Now, while you have two go routes down each boundary to try to stress the safeties, and maybe give you an option for a deep shot if you get something like press coverage with only a single high safety, really most of the time the quarterback is going to be throwing to this middle read, hence the name of the concept. And that's because the route itself will change depending on the coverage the tight end sees. If he gets what's called a mofo look, or middle of field open, he'll just keep running the route down the middle to split those safeties and ideally create a conflict for those safeties between covering him and bracketing the go routes over the top down the boundaries. But if the wide receiver reads a middle of field closed look instead, meaning a safety in the middle of the field, he'll bend the route even further and cross the safety's face to give the quarterback much better leverage for the throw. Now, the one coverage that really gives middle read problems is Tampa 2, which the Lions happen to be running a variation of here called Tampa 2 Tent. And it makes middle read really hard to execute because if you have a Mike linebacker carrying the seam route up the middle, as well as a hook defender dropping that can rob that receiver if he bends the route into a deep cross, there's just really nowhere to go with the ball deep down the field. The safeties don't get stretched because the linebackers are protecting them from underneath, and instead they can just play a bit looser and go after those deep shots down the boundaries if they really want to. And honestly, the only real option this play has against this coverage is to just check it down and get what you can with yards after catch. Checking it down is the smart decision that I was hoping to see from Jones here when he saw the Mike linebacker drop to carry the middle read while the safeties expanded into a two-high shell, the main ways that one would read that it's Tampa 2, but instead of the safe, smart throw against a very conservative coverage, he did the exact opposite of that. He came off of the middle read and then looked to the go route down the boundary, all the way from the far hash, mind you, and he took an extra hitch before he tried to throw it too, so the ball was going to be late no matter what. And truth be told, he's extremely lucky that this was technically only an incompletion instead of an interception inside of his own 40-yard line. Unless you have a ridiculous cannon for an arm, which Jones doesn't have, or a ridiculously fast receiver that can burn everyone's angles in cover 2, which I promise you Cody Latimer is not one of those, there are zero circumstances under which Jones should ever attempt this throw. And instead, he should have just checked it down to his back to get what he could after the catch to set up an easier third down. Instead, he tried the go route and, like I said, got extremely lucky that this ball wasn't picked. And believe it or not, that kind of really bad read was not an isolated incident, particularly on throws that were anywhere over 15 yards down the field against zone coverage looks, or anything outside the numbers. He just didn't see the field on those kinds of throws, and I could pull up examples from literally every single game he played, even the good ones, where I'm like, damn Daniel, what were you even looking at? Like, how did you not see Stephon Gilmore as the hang corner and throw it right to him? Or later in the year against the Eagles, how do you make a conscious decision to throw it to the boundary on 4 verts against a sinking cover 2 corner that's looking right at you the entire time? There were just so many inexplicable decisions, and while yes, the good Daniel Jones would show up in every game too, I always felt like the Giants' offense was taking 1 step back for every 2 steps they took forward. Jones in particular was a hell of a lot closer to the Jameis Winston reckless style of play than he was to the conservative Alex Smith clone that most people, myself included, thought he was going to be. Hell, to be honest, if Jones really was another Alex Smith, the Giants probably would have won more games last year. That's just how unfortunate and erratic his turnover problem really was. Beyond just giving the ball to the defense way too often though, Jones also struggled in another area that I thought he would have been better in as a rookie: deep ball placement. Weirdly enough, on throws more than 20 yards down the field, Jones was 8th in the NFL in catchable pass rate, meaning the passes were within the receiver's catch range and they had a chance to bring them in. However, despite technically throwing a lot of catchable passes, his actual completion percentage on those deep passes was 28th in the NFL at only 25.5%, which is insanely low. Now, I saw that discrepancy and thought it was strange, and that it might have been because of his receiving core not getting open enough, or maybe he had a lot of drops happen to him, but believe it or not, his receivers only dropped 4 deep passes all year long, which is not a lot, and certainly not a big number out of his 47 total deep pass attempts. Surprisingly, he only had 12 completions all year on those deep attempts, but there were an additional 14 catchable passes broken up by DBs. That's a lot of PBUs in only 12 games, especially since there were more broken up passes than there were caught passes. In an effort to figure out why Jones's completion percentage was so low on those catchable balls, I watched every single one of those pass breakups to get a better idea of what happened, and here's what I found. One of those breakups was on a last-second Hail Mary, so it doesn't really count. 3 of them were just straight-up great coverage by DBs, and there wasn't anything wrong with the throw or with the route. But 10 of those 14 breakups were, in my opinion, primarily the fault of Jones for not being able to properly place the ball down the field with the leverage of his receiver. And by leverage, I mean the positioning of the DB relative to the receiver. So for instance, on some throws, if the receiver had a step vertically on the corner and all Jones had to do was just leave the ball deep so his guy could stack on top of the DB and run under the ball, instead he would leave it short or inside where the DB could then get back into position to break it up. Or conversely, sometimes the DB was stacked on top of the route, playing the aptly named stack technique and taking away the possibility of beating him deep. And against that kind of coverage technique, you really want to throw the ball to the back shoulder and let the receiver stop and adjust to it while boxing out the defender. Guys like Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson are masters of making throws like that against corners playing stack technique. But Jones, of course, would instead make it harder on his receivers and leave it deep where they then had to fight through the stacking defender to get to the ball, rather than just having a clean catch opportunity on their back shoulder. Ball placement and throwing to the leverage of your receiver is such a critical skill that makes such a huge difference in whether the ball gets caught or not. But Jones was just straight up bad at it last season. He could have and should have set a ton of rookie passing records last year, whether in touchdowns, yards, efficiency, whatever metrics you want to use. He had every opportunity in the world to do that, especially in a Pat Shurmur offense that has always been very quarterback friendly. But he had just enough critical problems holding him back that I really don't know what to make of him still. The accuracy on everything but deep balls was there, the toughness was there, the athleticism was there, his arm strength is okay, he's a hard worker, he was overall pretty productive. I mean, there's just so much to like about Daniel Jones, but for as much as I honestly do like about him, the complete obliviousness to pressure, the lack of touch on deep balls, and the absolutely terrible decision making against zone coverage, all of that makes me just as concerned about him as I am impressed with him. He is, for all intents and purposes, another Jameis Winston. He's exciting, but frustrating. He gives you hope, and then he takes it away. He always seems like he's just about to get over the hump, but you're not 100% confident that he'll actually clear it. Truth be told, I don't know if Daniel Jones is the answer for New York yet. He's better than I thought he would be for sure, and all of you are well aware of how much I disliked that pick at the time, but I don't know if going forward he's going to keep exceeding expectations to become that fabled franchise quarterback. I'm not ready to anoint him just yet. Hell, I'm not even ready to say he's going to be a bust either. Nobody knows that. So I guess to finally get back to the question I asked at the top of this show, is Daniel Jones a good quarterback? There's really only one answer I can give you, and that's 100%, definitively, decisively, maybe. Thank you for watching this week's episode, and thank you to our sponsor for the week, Mizzen. If you've never heard of Mizzen, they're a fantastic company that began with a huge Kickstarter campaign several years back, with the goal of providing high-quality knives and other cutlery, but without the insane markup that you typically see from other premium cookware brands. I've been using their chef's knives that they sent me about a month ago to cook a lot of meals over the past few weeks, and these are already some of my favorite knives that I've ever owned. There's a lot of weight to the handle, so it's very well balanced, and you really feel like the blade is an extension of your arm, and you have a lot of control. It's made from Oz-10 Japanese steel, which was surprising to me, because most high-quality knives made from good Japanese steel like that have really high carbon content to hold super sharp edges, those are usually mega expensive, but this knife is less than $70. It's ergonomic, it's wider than many other knives so that you can use it kind of like a bench scraper to scoop up diced veggies and stuff if you want to. It's just a great knife, especially since it's being sold at basically wholesale prices because Mizzen only sells their products online. As you can see here, it was the main tool that I used for preparing dinner for myself and my wife a couple nights ago. If you're wondering exactly what this dish is, it's a broiled tomatillo salsa made from tomatillos, white onion, garlic, and jalapenos, blended up together with some salt and cilantro. And then I took that salsa and combined it in with a white cheddar cheese sauce that I made over the stove, which was for some pasta that I was cooking on the side. And at the same time, I also julienned some red pepper and sauteed that in olive oil, all while pan-searing a couple chicken breasts also in olive oil, as well as a rub that my wife brought me back from New Mexico that I can only describe as satanically spicy, but holy shit it was good. And in the end, using pretty much just my knife and my blender, I made a delicious, amazing dinner. If you want the full recipe, I'll link to it below because I just kind of slightly modified something from Sam the Cooking Guy. Highly recommend you check him out too, but it's a great meal. And yeah, overall, this knife is awesome. I love using it. I've never owned premium knives before because I could never really afford them, but Misen as a brand is different. They do business differently, the prices are lower, so I'll absolutely keep buying more of their knives for my kitchen because of how much I love the chef's knives I already have. So if you want to check them out for yourself and explore the products they have to offer, go to misen.co/filmroom. Again, not misen.com, misen.co/filmroom. And if you decide to buy anything while you're shopping, you get 20% off your first order at that link. Again, they're awesome. I love them. Just check them out. See what you like. Now, as for channel news, I do have another podcast coming out, I believe later today, potentially early tomorrow, over on the Bootleg Football Podcast channel with me and EJ Snyder. We already had one other episode come out earlier this week reviewing the Mahomes contract and Cam signing in New England, also the likely Redskins name change, so check that out too. And in this second episode this week, it's all going to be about the NFC West and their respective offseasons to wrap up that draft recap series once and for all. So again, I'm hoping to have that out sometime later today, probably early tomorrow at the absolute latest. But yeah, other than that, I've got nothing else for you until next week. Thank you again for watching, and I hope you're staying happy and healthy. Until next Friday, later.